The Prime Minister was asked about the ongoing protests in the U.S. today and what he thought about President Donald Trump's harsh response to the unrest. The Prime Minister took a long, I've never seen anything like this, to be candid. I'm going to just show it to you. I mean, this was 21 seconds. No one knows. We can only interpret if it was an intentional pause, if the silence was the commentary, or he was trying to formulate his thoughts on a difficult diplomatic issue. You decide for yourself. Check this out.
You've been reluctant to comment on the words and actions of the U.S. president, but we do have Donald Trump now calling for military action against protesters. We saw protesters tear gas yesterday to make way for a presidential photo op. I'd like to ask you what you think about that, and if you don't want to comment, what message do you think you're sending?
We all watch in horror and consternation what's going on in the United States. It is a time to pull people together, but it is a time to listen. It is a time to learn what injustices continue despite progress over years and decades. But it is a time for us as Canadians to recognize that we too have our challenges.
The 21-second pause heard around the country, but what was not heard was Donald Trump's name. Was that a smart diplomatic move or not? Today, NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh criticized the government's efforts, or in his view, lack of effort, to address racism and discrimination in Canada. But what would he do differently? Was it a mistake for the Prime Minister to pause and avoid calling out Donald Trump by name? Let's find out. Joining us now is Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP. Sir, hope you and the family are well. Good to have you back on the program. You've asked repeatedly for the Prime Minister to commit to ending racism in Canada. He spoke today about his own mistakes in the past, wearing blackface without mentioning those words again. What do you think they should be doing concretely right now?
The Prime Minister has jurisdiction over the RCMP, and CSIS could commit and could immediately end racial profiling. We know that from various people, including prosecutors themselves, that state that racial profiling, or carding as it's known in Toronto, erodes the trust between the public and the police. It makes it more difficult for the police to do their job. It makes it more dangerous for communities because there is not a trust in the police. So immediately ending racial profiling, ensuring that we collect disaggregated race-based data so we have evidence-based decision-making on where there are inequalities, ensuring that we actually invest in communities that are struggling, that are facing lack of access to good education and jobs. There's so much that we can do directly and make some concrete decisions. We can end the over-incarceration of people based on the color of their skin. We can end the over-policing of people based on the color of their skin. Black people are faced with systemic discrimination. Indigenous lives are over-policed and over-incarcerated. There's a lot that can be done if the government was more interested in action than on saying pretty words. What we've seen from the Prime Minister were certainly some nice words, but he has the power to do something about it, and he could act.
Okay, but let's talk about, from a concrete point of view, you've said he could collect data, race-based data, to make changes. You've advocated for the use of body cameras on police officers. You know, we had the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Toronto on yesterday saying that's the wrong way to go. That's going to increase police budgets. She says the idea is to decrease police budgets, at least defund the police more because they're over budgeted, and we have to redefine security in a social context, not just in a police context. What do you say to that? That seems to go the opposite way of what you're talking about.
Well, in terms of where our priorities are, we know that in communities that are struggling, over-policing those communities is not making them any safer. These are communities that need investment. So yes, we should be investing in affordable housing, investing in better access to education, better access to jobs, better access to healthcare. Those are certainly far more important as real determinants of poverty, and therefore the incidents of crime are directly related to lack of opportunity and lack of chance to build something in one's life. So there's absolutely a priority that should be placed on investing in these determinants of poverty, and those will allow communities to be lifted up. I absolutely believe in that. But at the same time, we have powers over ending racial profiling. The federal government has powers over ensuring that there's not an over-incarceration of people based on the color of their skin. These are things that we can absolutely do and, in fact, would save money. Policing and putting people in jail are significantly costly and haven't been shown to make communities safer. There is a better approach where we approach a problem with rehabilitation, with support service, with restorative justice. There's so much more that we can do.
Mr. Singh, do you think that the Prime Minister should have more overtly and specifically called out U.S. President Donald Trump, or given the critical relationship we've got with trade, that might have been counterproductive? What would you have done?
Well, there's time in history where there are certain comments that need to be called out. What President Trump has said very recently is inflammatory, irresponsible, at a time when our country is gripped with pain and struggle and frustration and anti-Black racism. For President Trump to say the comments he said, effectively calling on open war on American citizens, is reprehensible, and it should be called out. There are certain moments in time when we cannot back down. When someone is saying something so inflammatory and so purposely divisive and something so clearly wrong, like President Trump has said, those comments have to be denounced.
Mr. Singh, he said his job is to speak about Canadian situations. What do you make of that? That's how he said he's not going to call out Trump openly.
I disagree. Canada absolutely should be acting as a global citizen and calling out human rights violations wherever they occur. It's important to call out the human rights violations going on in Hong Kong. It's important to call out the situation of the Rohingya Muslims in Bangladesh and in other surrounding areas where they're now being kept, where now they have refugee camps. It's important to call out the human rights violations happening in India with minority communities, happening in America. And the fact that the President of America, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has said inflammatory, divisive, and effectively racist comments has to be called out.
I got to leave it there. Those are strong words. We have not heard those words from the Prime Minister at all, but we're hearing it today from Jagmeet Singh. Sir, thank you. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.